Hello. It's no doubt that you have heard that China has surpassed the United States to become the wealthiest country on the planet. And this source is completely trustworthy, there is no room for debate here. But the real question is, what does this mean? Does it mean that if China is the wealthiest country, it will replace the US as the leader and dominant force in the world? Unfortunately, the answer is no. Somehow, it is true that China is the wealthiest country in the world, but it is also true that China is still poorer than the US. In addition, experts believe that, instead of being happy about becoming the wealthiest country in the world, China should worry about the possibility that its economy will encounter a crisis in the future. To understand this issue clearly, let's watch the video together. First of all, China is indeed the wealthiest country in the world. 22 years ago, the US had a total asset of up to $45 trillion, while China had less than $10 trillion, precisely $7 trillion. The gap between the US and China was huge. But in 2022, China has unexpectedly become wealthy, as they have a total asset of up to $120 trillion, while the US only has $90 trillion. Within the same period, the US only increased its assets twice, while China has become wealthy 17 times. It is truly a stunning growth rate. China is the wealthiest country in the world, meaning that, if we add up all the assets of China, including wealth, real estate, minerals, etc., everything that can be bought and sold, the total asset of China is $120 trillion, and China is indeed the wealthiest country in the world. However, China is not the strongest country in terms of the economy. China still cannot surpass the US. China's population is 4 times larger than that of the US, so it is easy to see that a country with a larger population will have an advantage in terms of total assets. When it comes to a country's wealth, China is certainly richer than the US, but in terms of the wealth and living standards of its people, China cannot be compared to the US. According to World Bank data, the average income of Americans in 2021, or GNI per capita, is $70,900, compared to only $11,800 for China. Therefore, the income of each American is still 6 times that of a Chinese person. However, a larger total national asset still has its advantages. For example, if a war were to break out, China would only need to spend 10% of its total national assets to have a huge resource to fight against enemies. On the other hand, if the US were to spend 10%, it would not be able to compete with China. Clearly, having a larger population still has its advantages. But this is not the most important factor. The following 2 issues are what really matter, and provide us with a more accurate view of the US and China. Firstly, you can see that China's asset growth rate is 9 times that of the US. What does this mean? Does it mean that the Chinese are more talented than Americans? No, that is completely false. To evaluate which country's people are more talented, we need to look at their GDP, or the total wealth they create. The average GDP per capita of Americans in 2022 is $70,200, while each Chinese person only creates $12,400. Therefore, Americans work 5 to 6 times more efficiently than the Chinese. So why is China's wealth increasing faster? The answer, and the truth, is that Americans spend more, while the Chinese save more. Imagine 2 families with the same income of $5,000 per month. Family A spends $4,000 on food, travel, and investing in their children's education in that month. Family B only spends $2,000. Therefore, after 1 month, Family A has $1,000 in assets left, while Family B has $3,000. Clearly, by saving, Family B is richer than Family A, and that's what's happening between Americans and Chinese. Americans spend 77% on services, while the Chinese only spend 54%. While Americans spend on services such as food, travel, and goods, the Chinese save and build houses. They build a lot of houses, and as the price of houses increases, the total assets of families increase. On the other hand, Americans buy things like cars that they throw away after 10 years, and these assets become worthless. But why don't Americans save like the Chinese? The answer is that they are already rich. If you already have a house, a car, and all the amenities you need, of course, the money you make will be spent on travel and leisure. That's what Americans are doing. But if you are still poor, don't have a motorbike, a house, or a car, then of course you have to save and buy these things before you can spend on leisure. That's what the Chinese are doing. Therefore, China quickly accumulates more wealth and is richer than the US. but the truth is that Americans enjoy a better quality of life. And this leads to the third problem, which is that China's economy has encountered serious issues. As mentioned earlier, the real estate problem is that buying a house is a basic need for Chinese workers, but the truth is that they cannot afford it. Despite the fact that many houses have been built, the reason is that the wealthy in China have spent a lot of money to hoard and raise house prices. When house prices rise, the wealthy in China hoard even more, while the people become less able to buy houses. It is estimated that a citizen needs 55 years of salary without spending any money to buy an average apartment. That's why there are 50 million vacant homes in China, even though workers have no place to live, and people cannot afford to buy a house. Real estate giants keep hoarding and pushing prices up, which is called a bubble. If it continues to blow, the bubble will eventually burst. China's economy may collapse because of this, as evidenced by the recent debt crisis of China's real estate tycoon Evergrande. Interestingly, China's total assets include land and house prices. They only raised real estate prices up to make the country's total assets surge. This is why China's wealth is a scary threat to their economy. In summary, China is rich but not really rich. Thank you for watching the video. Please leave your comments and subscribe now to never miss a video, and let's learn together. See you again.